Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm here with Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to be sharing with you a project featuring the Simon Says Stamp and Hero Arts exclusive stamp set, Happy Thanksgiving. This stamp set was created for Simon Says Stamp for their STAMPtember event. This is a month-long celebration of stamping that has been going on since September 1st and will be continuing until the end of the month. This project is going to be featuring Distress Crayons. Distress Crayons are a newer product from Ranger and Tim Holtz, and they're a really fun medium to use. I'm going to be using them to create a fun, messy watercolor look. The loose nature of Distress Crayons allows you to create that messy watercolor look really easily. I'm going to show you how. Before we get started on the project, I wanted to show you the stamp set. This is the Happy Thanksgiving stamp set, and there are coordinating dies that go with it. The dies cut out the two words thanks and giving. I don't have them yet, but when you purchase your stamp set, the dies will come with the stamp set. I'm also going to be using the nesting tag dies from Hero Arts. These are a newer product from Hero Arts that came out for their winter collection, and I'm going to be using them to create these fun little tags. The dies come with not only the tag shape, but it also comes with the hole reinforcer and the cute little tag strip that goes over the top of your tag that kind of creates a nice little embellishment. I'm cutting the tags from some linen cardstock, and I'm also cutting the little hole reinforcer pieces as well from the linen cardstock. And I'm cutting out not only one of each tag, but I'm also cutting out a second one as well. And I'll show you what we're going to do with the other tags later on. For now, I'm going to go ahead and pop out all the little negative pieces of our hole reinforcers. To pop out the negative pieces, I'm using the Tim Holtz craft pick, and this is a nice fine tip that gets inside the little holes of your dies really easily. Now here's all the pieces that I ended up die cutting. I die cut 2 of each of the tag shapes, and then I also die cut 2 of the hole reinforcers. And I'll go ahead and end up using only 1 of each size of the little circle hole reinforcers, but I did cut some extras just in case I needed them. Now before we get started on the crayons, I need to prep my paper with some gesso. This is what helps me get some really great results with Distress Crayons. You're going to want to use a brush that you're not going to be using for regular coloring because the gesso does kind of create a little bit of a hardness to the brush. So I do like to make sure that I use a brush that's reserved only for the gesso. Now you can see the consistency of the gesso is very smooth and creamy. And you only need a little bit to apply to your paper. I'm using a very thin coat to apply onto my cardstock. And this cardstock is just regular linen cardstock and is not technically meant for watercoloring. But when we apply the gesso over top, it gives the paper a coating that will allow the watercoloring to not pill our paper, which is a great way to get more use out of your cardstock and not have to worry about using watercolor paper for this technique. I'm going to start stamping the images from the Happy Thanksgiving stamp set onto my tags. I'm creating backgrounds on these tags, so I'm going to be stamping the images from the stamp set in a random fashion all over the background of this tag. I used not only the pumpkin pie, the corn husks, and the pumpkins on my background, but I also grabbed a couple of images from the Simon Says Stamp Sketched Ranunculus stamp set. I thought these matched well with these images that are included in the Happy Thanksgiving set, and I needed something to help fill in some of the smaller areas around my background, so I went ahead and grabbed those. For the second tag, I'm going to be using the pumpkin and the corn husk again, but I'm also going to be using the wheat stalk, and I'm using that in place of the pumpkin pie because I wanted this one to be slightly different than the first tag. I'm also going to be grabbing those 2 images that I used from the Sketch Ranunculus set, and I'll put those in between the larger images just to fill in the spaces. So now it's time to bring in our crayons. I'm using a variety of different colors here from a few of the different collections of Distress Crayons. You can purchase the crayons in both sets and also as single crayons. So if you don't want all the different sets and you want certain colors, you can purchase them individually. Now for the pumpkins, I'm using spiced marmalade. I really think this is a great color for pumpkins. And I'll actually end up blending 2 colors together for the pumpkins on the second tag because I like being able to kind of mix colors together to create new ones, and I think it really adds a little bit of interest. And I'll show you how I do that in a few minutes here. For the corn, I'm going to be coloring the husks with a green color. I believe this one is peeled paint. I'm just going to go ahead and start scribbling the color on there. And then as I'm coloring, I'll go ahead and start moving the color outside the lines of the images to create that messy look. And I'll end up doing that for all of the different images in the background. Doing the messy watercolor really adds a nice artistic feel to the coloring. Because of the larger nature of the crayon itself, it lends itself towards the messy watercolor look really easily because you can't really control the placement of the crayon very easily. So here I'm just dabbing color, mixing red and purple together to create a nice pinky purple tone, and I really think this adds a nice fall feel to the berries. For the background, I'm going to start scribbling color around the little berry images that are those tiny little clusters. And this is antique linen and also a little bit of dried marigold. I'm scribbling those around the berries because I want the color to be concentrated darkest over around those berry images. And then I'm going to blend it out towards the outer edges of those images. And I'm letting that blend out into the background around each image on this background piece. And I'll continue blending this until I have the entire background colored with the crayon colors. The water brush that I'm using here is from Simon Says Stamp. This is the medium size of the two different watercolor brushes that they carry. I really like these water brushes because the barrel of the water brush is actually quite large, so it holds a lot more water than normal watercolor brushes, and you don't have to refill it quite as often. Now moving on to the second tag, I'll go ahead and color this in the exact same way. I did change things up a little bit. So here for the pumpkins, I colored it not only with the spiced marmalade, but I also used a little bit of rusty hinge as well. I'm going to color the corn husks in the exact same way that I did for the first tag, and then I'll move on to coloring in the little wheat stalks. For the wheat stalks, I used a bit of dried marigold and also a little bit of yellow. I believe this was mustard seed. And I blended that out across the wheat stalks, just kind of letting the color go around the wheat stalk itself. For the berries, I colored those the exact same way that I did on the first tag. And then by the time I got to the little berry images, I ended up using a darker brown color to color in the berries itself, and I also used that same brown for the stalks on the pumpkins. I'm coming back to my largest tag, and I let it dry before I went back to creating some more layers to the background. I like being able to add layers using the Distress Crayons because they leave a little bit of a harder edge when you watercolor with them, and I think it really adds to the nice artistic feel that we're going for on these tags, and the watercoloring appears a little bit more organic. I'll repeat the same process for the other tag, the smaller one, and I'm going to go ahead and continue adding the background colors using a variety of yellows, browns, and oranges until I have the entire background colored in with my Distress Crayons. Now I also need to color in our little tag reinforcers, so I'm using a variety of Distress Crayons and I'm coloring over top of these pieces. Now because we had applied the gesso to not only the tags but also these tag reinforcer pieces, that's going to allow us to be able to watercolor over top of these as well. So I'm setting them aside as I color them. I'm using the same colors that I had used on the tags itself to color in these little reinforcement pieces. Once I have the reinforcement pieces colored in and they've dried, I'm going back in with those same colors and intensifying the color of the Distress Crayon. Adding in the darker color really brings the vibrancy of the Distress Crayons to the forefront, and I think adding the extra color for more vibrancy really makes a good impact on your card. If you only want to go with one layer, you definitely can, but I do like the intense look of the colors when we have multiple layers. Now I want to make sure that my tags have a little bit more of a reinforced feel. I don't want them to be too flimsy, and also they're a little bit warped from all the watercoloring that we've done. They didn't pill at all because we have that gesso applied, but because of all the watercoloring and gesso that we applied to the tags, this is a thinner cardstock, so having a second layer of cardstock underneath is going to help give them a little bit more of a reinforced feel. This is why I die cut 2 tags of each size. So here I'm taking the other large die cut tag that I had created, and I'm going to attach it to the back side of my first tag. And I'll go ahead and just use some regular adhesive to attach this down. I'm also going to glue down the reinforcement pieces. I'm just taking some liquid glue and applying it to the back side of the reinforcement piece, laying it down onto the tag, and then I'll go ahead and fold it over the top portion of the tag, and that'll go ahead and hold it in place. And I just pressed it down really well to make sure that it adhered to the paper nicely. I'll also take the circle reinforcement piece and I'll lay that right on top using some more liquid glue. And I'll repeat this for the smaller tag as well. So here's our tags all put together. They're looking really good so far, but we're also going to be adding a few sentiments from the Happy Thanksgiving stamp set. So let's go ahead and start working on those now. I'm taking the largest of the 2 sentiments. This is the thanks and the word giving as well. You could stamp these together to say Thanksgiving, but I'm actually going to be using both individually on each tag. So I'm going to be using thanks for one of the tags and giving for the other, and I'm stamping them first in some deep iris ink from Altenew. Now I want them to have the same color tone that we have for the berries on our tags. So I'm going to re-stamp back over top of those stamped images with some Schoolhouse Red ink from Simon Says Stamp. This is going to give that purple-red tint that we have on the berries and match up really nicely. The Missy is a great tool to be able to use while you're doing multiple stamping over top of each other with the same image, so it allows you to make sure you get perfect placement every time. Now I also took a couple of the smaller sentiment pieces. One is our and the other one is thanks. So the first sentiment will read our thanks and the other one will say giving thanks. I'm going to cut these out with my Cutter Bee scissors, just trimming around the sentiments and cutting them up really close towards the edge, but I'm also leaving a little bit of a white border. And for those of you that are newer to fussy cutting, I just go around the stamped image very carefully, turning the paper and not the scissors as I'm cutting. That's going to give me a much cleaner cut. So here's our sentiments all cut out, and I'm going to be laying these onto my tags. However, I need to first add a little bit more embellishing, and I'm also going to be creating a couple of banners to layer behind them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did that. I'm first taking the tags and putting them into my Big Shot machine, along with a double stitch die from My Favorite Things. This is a border die that's part of their basic stitch line dies, and basically just cuts a stitching detail into your paper. So I'm using this to go around all the edges of my tag to give it a nice little bit of finishing off, and I really think adding stitching detail to something like a simple tag like this really dresses it up quite a bit. So here you can see after I run it through my Big Shot machine around all the edges how we have that great stitching detail. Now I'm going to go ahead and start working on creating my banners. These banners are created with vellum, and I colored them with my Distress Crayons. And this works really, really well because Distress Crayons have a lot more movement to them, where you can actually manipulate the placement of them by rubbing them with your finger. A little bit like pastels where you can smudge them a little bit, Distress Crayons do the same thing. Now they don't smudge quite as much on vellum, but they smudge enough that it helped me blend them together on the vellum to create the texture look that I wanted. I didn't want this to be a smooth blend, so smudging them on the vellum was actually to my advantage. Here you can see they don't smudge a whole lot, but as you layer them on top of each other and blend them together, they really add this really nice, cool, variegated textured look to the vellum. And I really think it matched up with the freestyle artistic coloring that we've done on the tags really nicely. For the first banners, I used a mixture of mustard seed and dried marigold. And then for the second banners, I'm using seedless preserves and also candied apple and a little bit of antique linen. And I created 2 of each color because I'm going to use the same colors on each tag. After I've done all my smudging, I'm going to trim these down into banners. I'm creating the banner ends by cutting a slit up the center and then meeting it on both sides. And there you can see we have the perfect banner shape, and those will get layered up onto our tags. You can see how great they look, and I love the variegated texture of these. This really turned out really cool, and I was really glad that I did the experimenting on the vellum to see how it was going to look. Definitely try out using different mediums on different papers because you get different results on all sorts of different types of product. Experimenting is something I really love doing, and I was really glad that the experimenting that I did with the vellum really worked out so well because I love how it turned out for the tag. Now I'm going to adhere these banners on top of each other, kind of askew a little bit, and I'm going to attach them with my ATG adhesive, but you can use any type of adhesive you want. I'm not too worried about the adhesive showing through on this because the paper is already colored, so that's first of all going to hide the adhesive on the back side. And we're also going to be putting the sentiment on top, so that's really going to hide any adhesive that we have there. I'm taking some foam tape and I'm putting it on the back side of my sentiment pieces, and I'll go ahead and attach that sentiment right there up along my banners. I really love the color combination that I used on these tags. It really has that perfect fall feel. For some embellishing, I'm taking some May Arts twine. This is, I believe, the natural jute color. I'm not positive that's the name of it, but I will have it linked down in the video description, so you can definitely go ahead and find it over at Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to be creating a triple bow here. And this is very easy to do because all you need to do is create a couple of loops and hold them together into the center. We want to make sure that we definitely gather it up right in the center, and we're going to tie it into an overhand knot. And you're just going to quickly tie it into that overhand knot, and that'll create a little cluster of triple bows very quickly and very easily. I'm just going to fiddle with it until I'm happy with the look of the bows. And then I'll go ahead and show you. I'll just tie it into a second overhand knot to make it slightly shorter. And then I'll be able to glue this right down onto my tag. And you can see how the natural messy nest of the jute twine really adds to that fall feel. I'm going to adhere this down onto my tags using some liquid glue. This is PPA matte adhesive. I'll just put a little dollop of it along the backside, and then I'll press it down right into our tag reinforcer. And then I'll just put something heavy on top of it to make sure it stays in place while it dries. The final bit of embellishing that I did on these tags is that I added a few pretty pink posh clear droplets, and I colored the bottoms of them with a few Copic markers that matched up with the colors that I used in our tag. And I just glued them down onto my tags then with some glossy accents. So I hope this has inspired you to create some really fun freestyle watercoloring with not only the fun images from the Simon Says Stamp and Hero Arts The Happy Thanksgiving stamp set, but also with your Distress Crayons. Distress Crayons are a really versatile medium that I am really loving right now. And I hope that this has helped you out and given you some tips and tricks on getting the most out of your Distress Crayons. If you enjoyed this video, here's another one you might like featuring Simon Says Stamp STAMPtember exclusive products. This one features the Lawn Fun Happy Holidays stamp set and also some really fun techniques, so be sure to check that out. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can connect with me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as my blog. Thanks so much for stopping by and spending some time with me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon.